Our next keynote speaker is the founder and CEO of a certified B Corp that designs and builds healthy, inspiring homes and buildings by mimicking natural systems. Please join me in welcoming Stefan Aiguier of Green Hammer.
Great. I'm not very good at being tethered. Let's see. Well, we've all heard this before, right? Great teamwork provides the greatest results. Team synergy is when you have your team's outcome, total outcome is greater than the individual performances, right? We see this play out. Those organizations that can work collaboratively and cohesively together are awesome, right? So how do we make that work in our own worlds? Anyone here a Trailblazers fan? Yeah, nice. I am. And there we go. Anyway, it's a lot of fun being Trailblazers fan, at least the last couple of years. A lot of fun, kind of frustrating at times, but ultimately a lot of fun. And it's a lot of fun because every year they beat out their expectations, right? This past September, all the pundits are saying, oh, the Trailblazers are going to be the best, worst team in the NBA. And I was like, what? I didn't believe it, and ultimately they got to the Western Conference Finals, okay? That's second best in the West. They made the playoffs for sure, right? It wasn't a surprise to me, and it shouldn't be a surprise to someone who knows the Trailblazers because they built one of the most collaborative cultures in the NBA. I also want to give a shout out to the Women's World Soccer team right now because hopefully you're watching that. That's a team that's got synergy too. So how do we do that for our own teams? We need an effective playbook, right? Every great team's got a great playbook. It's just bottom line, right? We need to paint the picture for our teams. Everyone needs to know, where are we going, right? Why are we going there? We got to be motivated, right? We have to understand the rules of engagement, right? How we treat each other, how we work together to get to our win. We ultimately also need to know, what are the plays that we make to get there, right? So at Green Hammer, we've got our mission, vision, values, and process help us guide along that path, right? That's our playbook. And ultimately, you need to have these things. It's a bottom line for any business, and hopefully all the B Corps in the room have got this. If not, that's the next step. But bottom line for a collaborative culture is your values. That's key and core to all of this. I'm going to get back to this a little bit, but first I want to talk a little bit about why I care about collaborative culture. Ultimately, I've spent my entire career in the architecture and construction community, and we are not collaborative by nature. Architecture and construction, unfortunately, is a combat culture. It just has been for a really long time, right? And it's because architects and contractors look at their work in fundamentally different ways. They're different. Architects going to see the big picture, right? They're going to see the beauty and the intent and the legacy that's going to be left behind. The builder, they got to worry about, they got to warranty this building, right? It's got to be built on time and on budget, right? They've got to think about the safety of everyone in the process. And so, the architect sees the builder as someone who's in their way, someone who's trying to cut corners and save money all the time and, blah, blah, blah. And meanwhile, you've got the contractors, they don't understand the site construction restraints we have to deal with here. Right? So there's just an us versus them combat culture that's just natural in that world. And unfortunately, this is a world that's contributing nearly 50% of the global carbon emissions, right? We're exposing you and the environment to thousands of known hazardous toxics. I don't think it's the architects and contractors' goal to go out and do that, right? But we're really slow to change. And we're really slow to change, and I think one primary reason is our combat culture, right? We aren't able to be efficient enough to take that risk and make that change. Change is risk, right? We don't like change. Risk mitigation is a big part of this world. But I believe that if we were able to shift from that combat and be able to focus on the results, the time that we can save could have a much better result for everybody. So that was Green Hammer Design Build was born on this premise that great collaborative teams of architects and contractors working together can ultimately get the best results, right? And so we've been doing this. In the past few years, we've built over 40 net zero energy homes. We've fitted out healthy spaces for a lot of people in this room, so B Corp offices like ourselves and others. Thank you. And those zero energy homes, a few of them are in some communities that are right now, we know, producing more renewable energy than they consume on an annual basis. That's pretty awesome. And in 2018, the AIA recognized us as one of only 10 firms in the nation that are meeting their challenge that by 2030, all new buildings are carbon neutral. Super proud of that. I think it's awesome. And we need a lot more of that in the world. Thank you. But we do that, I think, because we don't waste time in combat. We focus on collaboration, right? And it's not easy at all. And like so many things in our lives, it's a journey, not a destination. A collaborative culture is something you gotta work on continuously. And so if we see this next slide, we'll find out. But we employ a lot of tools. And this tool that we see behind me, it's the Lencioni pyramid. And Peter Lencioni wrote a book, 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. It's an awesome book. If you guys are a team-oriented business, definitely must read. What you can't see is at the bottom of that pyramid, which is foundational everything, is trust, right? Essentially, each layer is a behavior that your team needs to emulate to be able to get to those results at the end, all right? And trust is something that at Green Hammer we build through a common language, shared values, understanding those rules of engagement, and understanding our differences and embracing them as strengths. Let's talk a little bit about that. I'm not a behavioral scientist at all. I definitely do not profess to be an expert. But I do know that at Green Hammer and a lot of other organizations in this room and other successful organizations outside of this room, Fortune 500 companies, to name a few, use behavioral tests for a really great reason. It's because it's not a pass-fail. Behavioral tests, they show us our strengths. They show us our inner innate strengths, preferences, and motivations. It's just a real common base language. You know, it's everyone, you want different people on your team, right? You want someone who's like me, who's a really high Colby index as a quick start, like I'm a 9, right? I'm gonna jump onto a stage and be like, all right, I'll talk in front of people, what are we talking about? I said I'd do this before I even knew what the topic was, all right? I've got other people on the team who are like, well, I wouldn't go up there, there's no safety rail, and people are all encouraging you to break a leg, and I really should be focusing on this other stuff because I think we're supposed to be designing building stuff. And so, you know, they're probably in that fact finder follow-through area, and they're much higher than me on those scores, right? We need that of each other. Diverse teams are important, and having that common language and understanding of our differences in a way that's like it's third party, right? And it's all about your strengths. And when you focus on people's strengths and their preferences, and you support that, and you understand it, then people excel, right? Because usually it's just like, I'm like, I don't understand what's so wrong. Why won't you just jump up here? I don't get it, you know? Until we start to understand each other, it's hard to build trust because we don't really understand where we're coming from. Make sense? So for us, that's a foundational way to help build trust, is to understand and embrace our differences and strengths. The other foundational is shared values, right? And shared values are really that rules of engagement, right? And for us, this is just a few, but there's so many values out there that are really universal, right? We wish to speak as we're spoken to. I mean, that's like the golden rule. That's super easy, right? But it's a contract. We see these as a contract with each other. It's just straightforward. The day you're onboarded in the company, we go over these values. This is how we work together, right? And we continue to train as we move along the way. You know, we believe everyone brings good intentions. That's a mantra at our firm. So we've got, you know, architect and superintendent like, right? That they're not maybe being their best selves. One of them can take a step back and say, whoa, you know, I know you bring good intentions right now. I know we all want the best outcome. I'm going to speak to you as I wish to be spoken to. And suddenly it's like, oh, okay. I'm like, that's like trigger words in our company, right? they just triggered me. They're like, I'm obviously not being my best self. I must be coming on strong right now. I'm going to take a step back. I'm going to take some time. I'm going to listen and try to understand what you're talking about and telling me right now. But those rules of engagement are really critical. If we don't have those, when things go sideways, where do we go? We need to understand that. We just need to have those base values. You don't have to have these. You can have all kinds. There's tons of really great values about how you work together out there. And it creates that common language. And the more you practice it, the more when you bring it up, people listen. So again, foundational is trust. If we can get to trust, and really trust is about being comfortable, being vulnerable with each other, right? But when we can lean on each other's strengths, right, and we can talk to each other during when we're having issues, and we know how we all behave, it's a lot easier to trust. If we can trust each other, then we can have healthy conflict. And healthy conflict, you want conflict. Conflict is good. Disagreement is good, right? We need debate. We need to have that to get to the best solution, right? We need to do it respectfully. We need that because just one idea is not going to get us there, right? So we want healthy conflict. We want to get to those best solutions because if everyone throws their ideas into the hat, then ultimately, or affects that final decision, then people are going to buy in. And if they buy in, they're going to be committed. And if we're committed as a team, then, if I'm saying, like, I'm not going to throw my team under the bus. When it comes down to, like, this decision maybe doesn't look so good, when you're kind of the road gets a little rough, right? Then people start saying, well, it wasn't my decision. We can't have that. You need to all work together, so you really need to commit. And if you can commit, it's easy to hold each other accountable, right? Hold ourselves accountable, hold each other accountable, and ultimately get to those results. And so, it's really that easy. And it works when it works, okay? It's simple when it works. The problem is, actually, it's just not that easy in some parts. And in particular, healthy conflict is really hard. It's just hard. It's just straight up. Like, what is healthy conflict? Like, oh, I like that idea, and the commitment part. Like, what is that? How do we work that together? We got to go back to that sandbox world, and we have to understand how we play well together, right? We have to create kind of that safe space and understanding, like mutual understanding, like how do we deal with healthy conflict? And so we need to get to what Craig Weber in his book, Conversational Capacity, talks about as the sweet spot. There's a lot of different ways to do this, but this is just one way. And, the sweet spot, that's healthy conflict. That's where we're debating, we're being respectful, we're sharing our ideas, our position on things, right? And we're getting to the best solutions. But unfortunately, most of us end up on one extreme, pulling away from that sweet spot, either on the minimize side or on the win side of the equation. I'm not going to name any names, but maybe some of us end up like we're on the win side of things more often than not. And it's not like you're always on one side or the other, but like, what are you talking about? What's the win side? Well, win side might be like, I walk into a room and I'm just like, I've got the best idea. I know I do. I've got the most brilliant idea. It's the most logical. I just need to go in. I'll do what I do. I'll tell my team. I'll be dynamic. And then when they all bob their head yes, then I know we've reached mutual agreement and we can move forward, right? Maybe that guy in the corner they disagree with me, but they disagree with me all the time, and I'm just going to be like fast. I'm like, right? And then I'm just move forward, right? As I prove that I'm the right one, okay? And meanwhile, on the other side of the equation, you've got people who are like, I just do not want to rile this person up any more than they already are. And I prefer to just avoid conflict, kind of seek some harmony right now. And I'm going to be quiet because I'm not even really sure, I'm not sure what idea I have, but I can see all kinds of issues with that idea. But you know what? If I just nod my head yes, I know what'll happen is that we can just go home, and we get this over with, and I can show back up to work tomorrow, and we're fine, right? Well, we missed a huge point, right? We missed that sweet spot. And ultimately, that person, in the end, those maybe multiple people in the room, when push comes to shove, and you really got to be pushing and holding each other accountable to get to those results, there's going to be a whole lot of people like, not my idea, bad idea. I tried to say it, but you weren't listening. Maybe it didn't come out of my mouth, but you weren't listening anyway. So, how do we get there? And what's going on? Ultimately, it's really pretty simple in a lot of ways. On the win side, you need to bring curiosity to the table. I got to be curious. How do I know my idea is so bulletproof if I haven't asked anyone to shoot holes in it, right? I need to test and inquire on my idea. I've got to be like, hey, please, everybody, I know here I got this great idea, but I know I'm missing something. I know I'm missing something. Please, can you share your position on this for me? And tell me your thinking behind it. It's interesting when you ask people what they think, it's like that's such a vague question. It's hard to answer that question, but when you ask someone's position on an issue, they tend to have it, right? And then if you share your thinking behind it, they'll tend to expand upon that, right? On the other side of the equation, you got to show up, right? If you got to go to a team meeting to make a decision, you got to show up. You got to know what your ideas are, right? You've got to bring your position. You've got to advocate for yourself. And you've got to share your thinking. Ultimately, you can't depend on that dominant person in the room to be their better self that day and engage you, right? And we're all on different ends of the spectrum, but you got to also advocate for yourself or maybe someone else. Maybe you're a little bit more in the in-between, and you're okay advocating your position, but you know that Sandy over there, she's got something brilliant to say, and she's just not saying it. You've got to be that bridge, reach out and say, hey, Sandy, what's your position on this? What's your thinking behind it, right? And lead by example. Maybe the other person's not doing it, but say, I know I'm missing something, and here's my idea, right? And it's just, all that stuff is key and critical. If we can bring more curiosity and candor to meetings where we need to get to the best solution, and we're going to get there. So ultimately, just kind of bringing these things together. Again, if we have shared values, that common language, right? The rules of engagement. If we know how to treat one another, we understand those expectations. If we understand each other's strengths and we can embrace those, we see differences as actually making us stronger, and that diversity making us stronger, then we've got a really good foundation for trust. If we have trust, we can move on to healthy conflict. We're going to be curious, right? We can be like, what am I missing? We can test our ideas. We inquire, what's your position? Please share your thinking. We advocate for our positions, right? We advocate for our thinking. If we do that, then everyone's going to affect that solution. And if we all affect that solution, we're going to have buy-in. If we have buy-in, that's where collaboration really happens. Commitment really is that core source of collaboration. When we can all as a team commit to something we know we're going to do, that's true collaboration right there. Right? We're not going to throw each other under the bus later. We're like, yeah, maybe it's a bad decision. We all decided on it. We pushed through, and we worked hard together as a team. I'm always going to reward that as a business owner. If I see that, I'm like, yeah, all right, you made a mistake. We'll learn from that. But you work together. You do that, you're going to be able to hold each other accountable. And accountability is really a lot of the similar things that go back to trust, right? Those shared values, that common language. And if we're committed to something, it's easy to hold each other accountable to that. And then you get the results. But the most important thing you got to remember is you got to have fun and be the change. Thank you.